welcome to BirdTricks. Dave and Jamie here, and we have an exciting announcement of a brand new resource that we are bringing you free on our website.
You see, we travel professionally both for parrot training as well as historically for our magic shows, and so we've learned a lot of do's and don'ts when it comes to having people watch over our birds, because one of the number one questions we get, especially at master classes, is like, who's watching your birds if you guys are here? So we have a lot of advice that we'd like to give you, and actually we don't 100% agree on all of it, so the cool thing about that is it's going to give you kind of two different perspectives.
Yeah, so what we came out with as our brand new free resource is a bird sitter handbook. Now, it not only has a section for the bird sitter, but it also has a section for you. And these are sort of things that we're still learning to today. You know, we come up with certain circumstances will come up and we'll just say, oh, you know how we could have done that better, or you know how we could have prepared that person better is doing this way. So through a lot of failures, we are bringing that new knowledge to you guys through this free resource. And as you know, we like to keep all of our information updated. So if there's anything that you guys see that needs maybe to be added or you have questions about, please feel free to leave those in the comments and we will consider it.
Yeah.
Okay, so to get started, part 1 is for the owner, that's you, and part 2 is for the sitter. So your bird sitter will have a total handbook of what to do in case of emergency, who to contact, how much to feed, all the things that you want them to do. Now there's varying levels of comfort when it comes to having a bird sitter, whether it's their comfort level or yours. So I have the handbook open on my phone, so I'm just gonna scroll through and we are gonna briefly talk about some of the things in this handbook. Again, if you look in the video description, you can download this for free on our website. So the first thing is it's all about finding that perfect person, when to start searching, what to look for in a bird sitter, and where to find them. So how have some of our bird sitters come about?
Ours usually kind of come about out of like neighbors that are like, oh, if you ever need somebody, we're like, actually,
really?
Yeah.
Is that an offer?
I like to pick people personally who have kind of an entrepreneurial background, who we know have a strong work ethic that will show up to do what we ask them to do in a guided way, as opposed to like a neighbor doing a favor.
Yeah, I think it definitely needs to be conditioned as a job where
Yes.
they always get paid. It's never just like, can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be taken more seriously that way. So we did put together a qualifications checklist of just kind of some certain things. Oh, look, Bondi sticker. So some of the stuff on our checklist is we did reliable private transportation. So if they're relying on public transportation or somebody else to transport them, that gets iffy for me. We're talking about feeding and watering your animals. Like, they don't survive if you miss that. So to me, it's a really big deal that they're reliable, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, and where we live too, you'd want to take into consideration things that could block the person from getting here. So we have what's called the long bridge. It's a mile-long bridge, single lane, and if it's blocked and somebody's coming from the other side of that, there's no way they're going to make it back in time to take care of our animals. And so I prefer having people that are just super close by. It's just more reliable, and if you need someone to go check really quickly, which we've had, it's possible, and it's not like a half hour or an hour out of their way to drive into town, check on your birds, and then go back out.
Yeah. So one of the things on this checklist, and keep in mind, this is a checklist you create. We've put some ideas on here, but they may not be part of your checklist. So a great example of that is the next thing that I'm gonna talk about is previous parrot handling experience. I would love to know in the comments, does this need to go on your checklist for when you look for a bird sitter, or does it not? So I'll let you talk about it first.
My preference is not, because...
Which I think might surprise everyone.
Yeah, I'll give you an example with after our shows, when people would come up and they get a photo with any of our birds, the birds are trained to do a very specific thing. I'm sure you've heard us talk about it. And there's a meticulous way that I do it so that the bird knows it's a trained behavior and that there's a certain expectation. It's always the people that are like, oh no, it's okay, I have a bird, that try to pet my bird and they ignore everything I said. I want to know that these people are going to do exactly what I tell them and not just be like, oh, well, I have a lot of experience with birds, and then I come back to a bird that's been unintentionally untrained or mishandled with good intentions from somebody who just really doesn't know how we handle our birds.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I think that we've had an array of that, and it reminded me of that masterclass where we were socializing the bird with everybody. and we put, I think it was Melanie, we put Melanie in charge of doing it with everybody. So they listened to her perfectly, and they held their arm out just as she said, and they didn't try to pet the bird just as she said. And then when it got to the one person that was way more like, oh, I have birds, it was a completely different story, and Melanie lost control really quickly.
It was really different. It was like, oh, handshake, okay, handshake, and spooning, what the, like, it just went so far so fast that the bird was, it was too much. And so I just want to avoid spooning
okay.
with the bird and my neighbors.
Yeah. Another thing on this checklist, as an example, is a willingness to learn and follow directions. And that's like really what matters to us the most. I think that's one of our top checklist things. So again, these are just kind of to get you started. Some things may or may not be on your checklist.
I do want to say where having somebody with prior bird handling experience has been key was with Rocco. And so we worked with somebody who had a toucan, who actually years and years and years ago, we helped with her toucan. And that was really important because if we needed somebody with more specialized experience, she had it. So that would be like kind of the example I would say, like, hey, as a backup, and she was our backup. She was, I don't know that she's ever been our primary caretaker, but it's like, hey, if you need help with moving Rocco, call this person. And that was awesome because it could get us out of almost any situation with confidence, knowing that this person had that experience. So you have to weigh those odds.
Yeah, I will say we have our primary caretaker, and then we have our backups for specific things. So the one that Dave's referring to, she was our backup if we had an injury, like Rocco hurt his toe one time out at the aviary and it had to be treated like every so often. And so she would go out there to treat it. But our primary caretaker was feeding and cleaning and doing all of that. So we didn't put that on our primary. We put it on a different caretaker. Or we've had specific caretakers to like take them to the vet all the way, because it's a long drive. It's at least an hour and a half. So we have certain caretakers that do certain roles. And I think that that works really nicely, because I think if it was the person that was medicating that was also feeding, you'd start running into more issues.
Yeah, so part of, kind of our checklist with people is like, hey, if something happens, here's who you can call. And so they had this backup in case a toe got injured or whatever that situation may be. Another section that we have in this handbook is red flags and kind of some things that you should be looking out for just in case that person's not the right person.
Yeah, so some of the red flags that we listed were fear of birds. So if somebody's just terrified of birds, probably not the right job for them.
Which is interesting because the first thought is like, yeah, but they're in the cage until they're not. That's when you really need to make sure that you have somebody that isn't afraid of them, but also not like overly fearless of them.
Yeah. The other red flag that we have listed on here is somebody who would be unwilling to come sort of train for the job. So anytime I have a caretaker stepping in, especially if I'm having somebody new that's just learning, I want them to come and do it when I don't absolutely have to have them come and do it, and I don't like need them. So I want them to watch me do it. I want them to then take over just one feeding and I'm still there. And I just want them to have that time where they don't feel rushed and like they have to get it right here and now, but they also have time to be like, oh, I didn't realize, why do you do it like this? Or why do you use this container? Where do I put this back? So it just kind of gives a lot of leeway for questions, and somebody who's unwilling to come learn and just thinks that, yeah, it's easy, I got it. Usually they don't got it. So this one definitely applies to you. Red flag number 3 is an over-enthusiastic person about handling your birds.
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to what I was saying. If somebody's like, hey, this bird is coming out and hanging out and I really want to hold it and pet it and touch it and love it all over and squeeze it, there's not a breath left in its little body. I do not want that person. I want somebody who's kind of got a healthy respect for the bird and is anxious to be told what to do and what they can do.
Yeah, I will say I've had caretakers where they're like, oh man, they were rushing in at me and I thought they were gonna bite me and I couldn't even get their food bowls out. So I had my friend come over to the other side and like they chased him over there, and then I was able to do this, and it's like, oh God, you're teaching my birds to attack people. And so inadvertently for them, they're just like, oh, I found a workaround, but it's not necessarily a healthy workaround. So those are things that you definitely want to teach people how to work around if that's gonna be an issue with your bird and that person. Which brings me to another red flag, is wanting to bring their friends over.
Yeah, this is actually interesting. So we have a caretaker who has multiple children, and she would just bring one child at a time, which I was okay with because the kid, we'd watch on a little security camera sometimes, and the kids never put their fingers in the cage. They were not rowdy, and I know this person well enough to know that if the kids were rowdy, like, oh my gosh, they would never be invited back. From the parent's perspective, not even ours, right? And so that's the kind of person that I want to trust too with this, is like, it's not come to the Womach Zoo, it's, hey, I need your help, here's how you can help me.
Yeah. And then lastly, we talked about it already, but just offering to work for free. This should really be a job and something that somebody treats as a job, not as a favor.
Yeah, and I would say even with like family, I would be 100% cautious of having family members just come take care of the birds, because it's a lot harder to be clear and stern with your direction. And like, I'll use my mom as an example, because she's had Tico, our blue and gold macaw, for 30 plus years. She's very set in a particular way that she has found works with that bird. It's not the way that I would do majority of it. So if I had her volunteering like, oh, I'll take care of your birds, it would be really hard for me to relate to her like, hey, I don't like how you've done it with your bird. You need to do it this way with ours. Even though that could be, she could be doing it perfectly, or she could be totally messing it up. I just think it's easier to not deal with family on that. And it's just easier to hire somebody that can do specifically what you're asking. Hope that doesn't come off harsh, because I don't mean it to come off harsh.
Well, and I'm gonna be the opposite of that. My mom takes care of our birds out at her property, and she's done it for a really long time. And I would probably argue that my mom is more particular than I am about their care.
Yes.
And she got super annoyed with me because I was training this new caretaker, and she was just like, you need to tell him this, you need to tell him that, you need to be specific about this, you can't just be lenient about that. And oh my gosh, I was like, you know what? You should train the caretaker, because obviously you're the true person here. But the reason that my mom works for this scenario is that she truly loves my birds as much as I love my birds. Like, she worries about them to the same level. It's amazing. Yeah. And I trust her fully. I also know her limitations, and she knows when she needs to get those backup caretakers for help and stuff. But under like general circumstances, she's fantastic. And so, going on playing devil's advocate on that, I have a situation that works for that exact same scenario. So I trust my mom 100% for the birds.
But that's kind of goes back to like when you're interviewing somebody, there's just kind of characteristics of that individual that really lend itself to knowing that your birds are going to be well cared for.
Yeah, I will say we've had some caretakers where, especially like we didn't have cameras back in the day, but we did have some caretakers where it just came to our attention, and was brought to our attention that they were waiting to clean everything until right before we got back versus keeping up on it. And that really bothers me with animals. I think it should be cleaned like every day, if not every other day. Obviously if we have our sun conures in a 5x8 aviary, it's not going to need to be cleaned every single day. That's tiny little poops. Like, it's worthless to do that every single day. But I don't know. It just really depends. But like waiting days upon days is just unacceptable. So I think that there's just some of those standards that need to be upheld.
Yeah.
Okay, so some favorite highlights from our bird sitter handbook is our page of who we are, meet the flock, where you get to add photos, you get to add the age, the species, all the different characteristics of each bird in your flock so that your caretakers can get to know them. What?
I'm Cressy, I'm hormonal.
I'm adorable.
I'm not choking.
I'm not dying. I just breathe like this when I look at you. We also have a section for the daily schedule, general notes, and your general house rules. So for example, for us, that would be make sure you lock Jinx's aviary. You don't need to put a lock on anybody else, but you do need to put a lock on him.
Jinxie, what do you do when I don't put a lock on your cage? Yep, that's about right.
So that would be like a funky rule that maybe not everybody has.
Yeah.
Also, I like to go over feeding because I was just on a consultation today where we were talking about the amounts that birds eat, and she was really concerned because she's just like, oh, this bird is this big but doesn't eat as much as my smaller bird. And I was like, so we have Cressy, who eats about as much as a macaw. And then we have Bondi, who eats less than one of my sun conures. So, and they maintain their weight. So that, I think it's really important to be able to let your caretakers know it's totally normal for this bird to get a smaller amount and eat that amount, and it's normal for this bird to get a large amount and eat that amount. Like, they just kind of need to get to know those nuances so they don't freak out and say like, Bondi's not eating. It's just that she can't consume that much. So it'll look like she's not eating if you give her the same portion as Cressy.
Yeah, and I think under those characteristics, it's worth noting like what their absolute favorite treat is, so that if something happens and you have to get the bird back in, you know that a banana is probably going to get Comet to fly, whereas a pine nut, he'll just look at you and go, hello. So, you know, if he got out, I'm not worried about him leaving, but I know that he'd go back in for banana for somebody who's afraid of handling that particular bird.
And that's something we teach all of our caretakers. We're like, hey, they never see these treats. These treats are really big deals. They are not in their normal diet. So if they get out, you need them to go back in, just grab one of those treats and clink it into a dish, and they will put themselves away. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to chase this bird around, like nothing.
Yeah.
It's gonna be easy. And that's how it's gone for everybody.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to make note of is we include our household dangers download in this. I think it's really important for caretakers to know, because they might wear perfume every day. They might bring a candle over to whatever. I don't know. They might do stuff.
They might self-clean the oven to help you out while you're away,
That'd be
right?
awful.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that they would need to be aware of that they cannot do.
Yeah, so this just kind of is something that you can print out for them, send them home with so they can kind of skim through it and just become aware of how sensitive birds are, because a lot of people don't know if they don't have birds. And keep in mind, you guys, we're just briefly going over some of the big points, but there's a ton more information in here. So dive in on your own time and like really get in deep to this. It has so many different resources. However, at the very end, we did need to include a worst case scenario. And this didn't really pop into our brains until this year, to be honest. I've never had this information in there. And sometimes I've had caretakers, my more advanced ones, who would already naturally know this. But for the majority of our caretakers, like my mom, she would have no idea about this. And so we just felt like it was important to include. And it's just sort of your worst case scenario. So if a bird passes in the care of your caretaker while you are away, what they should do, how to, oh, it sounds terrible, but like prepare your bird. If they
preserve it or not, so that you could do necropsy.
Yeah.
Like what to do so you don't lose
Ruin
the opportunity
results.
to get the results.
Yes, thank you. You said it way better. You should have just said this whole thing. Would have saved me so much. Stumbling
People
over
like
my
hearing
words.
from you, though.
Nah. Do
You're a
they,
wordsmith.
though? Yeah. Anyways, we're just gonna keep going. Okay.
It's a good spot to insert all the outtakes.
So another section in the Bird Sitter Handbook that you guys are going to, did I say that
I said
weird?
handbook. Handbook.
Okay. So this one definitely applies to you. Red flag. Oh my gosh.
Red flag.
Yeah, that's what we'll say I said. Anyways. Yeah. So they're always just me. Struggling. So with the only language I know.
Oh.
Kind of. I'm still learning English. So I think it's important for your caretakers to know what you want done in that scenario. And I know it's a horrific scenario, and it's why most people don't take vacations, because they don't want something like that to happen.
Okay, so when it comes to a bird passing in your caretaker's care, I think it's really important to have the conversation with them prior to you leaving and say, hey, if worst case happens, here's what I want you to do. Personally, I want to be like, anytime somebody checks in, I want to know that, hey, everything's good. Cool. If something happens, I can't change it. I don't want to know if I'm on a trip, if I'm on vacation, if I'm on a work trip. I just really, unless there's something where it's like actively happening and they need my input, that's one thing. But if it's like they came over and a bird's dead, I don't want to know until I get home. And having that conversation with them up front, I think just kind of eases the concerns for the caretakers to not be like, oh my gosh, do I call them? Do I tell them? What if, it's an international call or whatever the scenario is? I think it just makes it really clear and gives them a direction so that they don't have to think emotionally. They can just look logically and say, look, he said he didn't want me to contact him unless there's something he can intervene with to help, but this bird is no longer alive. We'll tell him when he gets home. Like, that's going to make it a lot easier for your caretakers than stressing about like, how do I tell them? So,
and we've talked about this before, especially when we were more in the midst of working on cruise ships consistently. But I remember Dave was like, Jamie won't be able to function or get through a show, or like, do not tell her. And so we've always had the rule of if there's any like horrifically bad news, it goes to Dave so that he can like filter it to me if needed. But I lose all functionality. Like if I was on anything, if I was on vacation, it would ruin it for me. I would completely just lose it. And then I think any sort of work related trip, I either wouldn't be able to perform in the show, or I would be like, my brain would shut off for any sort of masterclass or bird training. Like I would just be like, your bird's alive and mine's not. Like I would just be a disaster.
Yeah. So just kind of knowing how you handle that will help you decide like, we don't want to know, or it only goes through one of the two people, or whatever your scenario may be.
Yeah, and I think it would look different if I didn't have Dave to lean on, but I think because you're an option, I take that leeway. But if you weren't, gosh, I don't even want to think about it. But I would probably have to just hold it together and also be logical. Maybe that's too far. Oh, that sounded painful.
All right, guys. Well, hopefully some of this information helps shed some light on just a little bit of what we go into. Like we go way into detail in the actual download, but you know, there's a lot of things that we've learned, and based on our experience, we've made certain choices because of that. And we just encourage you to really think this through, and don't be afraid to go on vacation. This is actually, it comes up a lot. A lot of free flight students ask me like, hey, what do you do? And it's pretty simple. You just need to have some things planned through and different contingencies planned. But I would say the biggest thing that I could recommend, to re-highlight one of the points in here, is to have your main caretaker and then have a backup that can help bail that person out if somebody's stuck on the lake and can't get back in time, if they're stuck on the wrong side of the bridge and they can't get back. Have a backup plan in place for that caretaker just in case they have a medical emergency or whatever that may be. So, and that comes a lot from show experience too, where it's like there's 18 different outs to every magic trick we've ever done. And I think it's the same for caretakers. Just having that backup will ease your mind. It'll also ease your caretaker's mind.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much. Again, to get the download, check out the video description below. We will leave a link to it, or you can just go to birdtricks.com and check out our other free resources under freebies.